Hello and welcome to the Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival. My name is Neil Popish, and I'm the program director with the Jewish Community Center of Southern Nevada, a division of Jewish Nevada. The Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival and Jewish Nevada are proud to partner once again for the viewing of American Birthright and discussion with film director Becky Tahel. Special thanks to the Robinson and Frankoff families, the Anti-Defamation League, and our media sponsor, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, for their sponsorship and dedication to Jewish film. We hope that you have enjoyed our ongoing series of films and webinars. Please visit the Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival's website at www.lvjff.org for coming films and links to past films and discussions. We are honored to welcome today's panelist, Becky Tahel. Today's webinar will be led by Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival director Joshua Abbey. Becky Tahel is an Israeli-born, Los Angeles-based creator of conscious content. Becky runs Manifest Media with her husband, Nathan Ben David, where together they create mindful media for the Jewish and non-Jewish world alike. Before launching Manifest, Becky was the senior writer, producer at Jay Shetty's global media company, where she produced over 30 million views for a variety of global influencers. She consults and speaks globally as an advocate for ethically sourced content and the use of content creation as a self-development tool.
Becky, so wonderful to have you join us. Thank you.
So great to be here.
Thank you for participating in the Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival presentation of your new documentary, American Birthright. What an incredible accomplishment. And we're here today to share with the Las Vegas audience some of your reflections about the film. And we're going to get into some bigger philosophical topics about the seed of being Jewish in the world today as well. And we'll make it a conversation. So thank you for participating. Let's start off. My first question is, can you please share how your film has impacted other people, both Jewish and non-Jewish, who, like yourself, are curious and conflicted about their cultural and religious identity?
It's a wonderful first question. I feel like most people leave that for the end. Like, let's worry about the impact after, and let's hear about the process. So I really appreciate that. The impact has been really profound and really exciting to hear. I've had people reach out via email, via Facebook, at first on the trailer level, like just at the trailer level. We had the trailer in the world for a couple of years before we had the movie out. So people just after having viewed the trailer felt very seen. They felt like they could commiserate in the struggle of a sibling doing something that they don't quite align with, but also wanting to sort of journey to their self. And recently I've had a couple now friends, but they were initially acquaintances, who watched the movie and decided that they want to take off from work. They want to leave the country and they want to go to Israel to study. They were so moved by just seeing me pack my stuff in the one scene where I decide that's it. You know, my passport's in the suitcase and I go to Israel. They felt like, well, if she can do that, like maybe I can too. And it's, not to say that everyone needs to do what I did, but it's very exciting to see people make a choice to pursue more Jewish education, to pursue a trek to truth. And so, yeah, that has also been an impact for people.
Is it too soon for any of those people to have shared their resolutions with you?
Some of them, it is still, they're in the process and they're sort of sharing as they go. I have a friend who sends me, again, I call her friend now, but like a friend who sends me weekly WhatsApps of, this is what I'm learning, this is what I'm grappling with. And it's both nostalgic for me, obviously, like thinking back to, yeah, I remember when I learned that and that still bumped me and it still does. And so to have those conversations is really nice. And it's nice that someone feels like they can open up to me on that journey, because it's very personal and it's vulnerable and it's scary. And so a lot of those people are still in process. There are some people who I'm sure are on the other side and haven't shared with me where they are. There was a guy who reached out. He was dating a non-Jewish girl and said, I'm struggling with it. I really love her. It feels weird to even be struggling. And I very much feel seen by this. And I checked in and I haven't heard back. And again, no agenda. I just hope he's happy and fulfilled, but I haven't heard back from some of those people. So I hope they're doing well, and maybe I should follow up.
Well, it seems that the film has created a call to action, or enabled people, to have the motivation, to try and explore themselves deeper, and that's a remarkable accomplishment. So thank you so much for achieving that and helping people, receive greater insight.
It's like the one rabbi says in the movie. I agree. And thank you for saying that. It's education is the beginning of connection. And I think if we don't have education, or an education to the point that we feel a connection, that it's worth pursuing. So thank you for saying that.
So let's get a little more broad here. How do ethnic minorities maintain their cultural heritage and religious identity and still successfully assimilate into the mainstream social construct of the societies they live in? How do we do both?
I mean, that's a dissertation in and of itself, right? I think that's a beautiful question, and something that I'm very interested in myself. Obviously, as an immigrant, moved to America when I was 6.5. I still have family here that isn't super assimilated, and family that's extremely assimilated. So I think there's a couple definitions that we need to have, or need to sort of arrive at, like what is assimilation? Like on the scale of 1 to assimilated, what is the 10? And like, what are the repercussions of the 1 through 10? And then there's also sort of, like you said, in fitting with the societal norms, what are those? And I'll offer sort of my view on that is that America is called the melting pot, right? But I think it's like a chopped salad versus a melting pot. The melting pot means you come here and everything that you were melts away, and you're a part of the pot that is America or Americanness. And, maybe I tried to do that. I changed my name, when I was young, and I talk about that in the movie. I really do try to melt away the Israeliness to become what I thought as a kid was Americanness. And I now, later in my life, don't know that really exists. I think it is a chopped salad. And I think to know that you're a cucumber and that you are a part of a salad, like you're sitting on this plate that is America, is important. So I have reclaimed some of my Israeliness, and a lot more than I thought I would when I was younger, and brought that into the bowl, into the mix. And I think that is important. So when it comes to Shabbat, that is very countercultural. America works, it's 7 days a week for the most part. And maybe there's a day off on Sunday. Sunday is the holy Sabbath, we'll call it, really, in America. And so if I were to try to be very assimilated and just, abide by societal norms, I would say Shabbat doesn't work in America. And it didn't for me growing up. Now what I find, and especially we had a recent outage the other day, right? Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram were down for, oh my God, a few hours. And the memes and the feedback, my God, I had a friend that posted, I want to do this once a week. And I responded to her. I said, #Shabbat, like as a joke. She's seen my documentary and she said, I'm going to start observing. So all of that to say that maybe the societal norms that we think are very American are starting to change too. And if I had just completely abandoned them and melted away into the pot of Americanness, like I wouldn't have these things that keep me sane and keep me connected to my cucumber or my tomato. So I'm in an exploration. I don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. I don't want to make people uncomfortable around me. I don't want to make it impossible for people to work with me and relate to me. But at the same time, I'm not sure the norms that America has created are the best for it. So it's a question that I'm still walking with, and I'm really glad you posed it, because I wonder, how assimilated am I?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's the most fundamental question that we as a society have to try and define, because, is normalcy in the sense of assimilation and racial harmony invisibility? Or is it our distinct, heritage and, our background and our lineage and our history, which we're taught to embrace and to preserve and to teach, to our children. So it's like you said, I mean, it's just this sort of balance of a greater awareness, and that all boils down to, respect and tolerance and the fundamental principles of how people treat each other. But I think your film really dives into that in a very interesting way, and allows people to kind of explore that topic, which is really important.
Awesome.
So, what is your experience as a woman in the Jewish Orthodox community in relation to the public perception that is shaped by contemporary films, like, let's say, the Netflix series Unorthodox, which is, paints some pretty strong stereotypes of the culture?
Absolutely. We're in such an interesting time with this. Sarah Silverman also just came out with a whole piece about the representation of Jewish characters like Midge Maisel. All of, there's a new movie out, or even Disobedience, a previous one. All of these strong Jewish women, female characters are played by non-Jews. So it's really interesting as a Jewish woman who spent a lot of time acting and in Hollywood and all in that sense, but also now creating behind the camera as well in this space. The perception has, from what I believe on my end, been really positive, because I think we're hungry, we're thirsty for strong Jewish females that are balanced in a sense. Unorthodox, I've had a lot of feedback there, and I watched just the first episode. So again, not an expert, and I will always say that I'm not really an expert in anything. I'm an expert in being a non-expert. I always sort of try to adopt a curious lens and be in the inquiry, because I don't know. And I think that's sort of the journey I'm on. But what I did see and can see that is problematic in that show, and in sort of the representation of Jewish women in general in the media, is that there isn't a holistic view or holistic representation, and also of religious women. So what we see is either extreme sort of repression, and it's really difficult, and it's super black and white. And by the way, that is totally what I thought Orthodoxy was for most of my life. Or it's just a really funny, irreverent, crass other side. So it's these binary polarities of Jewish women expressing themselves. And I never really saw myself in either. I'm not gonna just say anything and wear whatever and not think of the repercussions that has on my community. And I'm also not gonna feel like I can't self-express, and that a woman doesn't have a voice or a role, or can't have worldly experience. And those two things do exist for some Jewish women. They have never existed for me. I am somewhere, I got a different shade of Jew somewhere that falls on the spectrum of the in-between. So it was really difficult for me at first to find my shade. And I think to know that there is your hue, like 70 faces to the Torah, there's a constant sort of reminder of that in Jewish education and Jewish thought. We're each a letter in the Torah, there's 70 faces, but yet we still think it's black and white. So again, my film encourages, and I will continue to tell people to do, and I'll encourage them to do, and I encourage myself to do, is to find your letter in the Torah. Find your shade. It exists. Do not pay attention to the binaries of media. Of course, that is what sells, and that is what is hot and sexy, and that's great. But it's not responsible media. And that's why I made this film. It's you got to find you. There are many ways to Jew. And I think that could really connect a lot of Jews back to their Jewish identity, back to observance, whatever that looks like for them, just to know you have permission to do it in your own way. Halakha, it's a highway, like we say, right? It's not like a one lane, everyone marches like this, but it's been stereotyped to be that. And I think all of that needs to go out the window.
I think the universe of the individual within the universe of the community is just as important as the universe of the community within itself, right? Because it's comprised of the individuals.
Absolutely.
As simple as that. But I think your film really illustrates that as well as does your personal journey.
Thank you.
But what is your definition of Jewish continuity?
Oof.
And can Jewish ideals and values be passed from generation to generation of Jews without religious participation? Can that still exist?
It's such a strong question. And I spent a lot of time over the last, 5-6 years of making this movie, really thinking about that. If I think back to what made me and kept me Jewish up until I decided to take on religious observance, there was a very strong sense of Jewish identity. And I didn't observe so much. There was some. So am I to say that Jewish observance is the only way? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Do I believe that it is a strong and really crucial part of experiencing Jewishness? Yes. And if I do think back to growing up, I experienced what Judaism was, and that's what kept me, though I went all over. In college, I loved all the Eastern traditions. I had friends who were Catholic and Christian, and I went to churches and saw that as well. I sang competitive choral music in high school. So I was singing a lot of Christian music, which was really interesting. I think Judaism is extremely experiential. It's different than many other wisdom traditions where it's very intellectual. Judaism is very intellectual, but I think it's got a really unique element to it that requires engaging with the experience of it. My mother is a Jewish educator and has been for over 30 years. And so I grew up in a home that was not observant, because as you see in the movie, she was raised observant and sort of was like, that's not for me, and I'm not going to raise my children that way. But what she did do was infuse the home with a lot of Judaism. There was Friday night dinners. Okay, fine. We didn't light candles at the exact time and our phones were never off. But there was that dinner, and there were all of the holidays, and there were stories, and there was song, and we would go to synagogue once in a while, but we went. And so we had some of that experience. And I think I held on to that, and that made an impact, and I felt it and I tasted it. And I'm not sure that I would have continued and pursued Jewish education throughout high school, even though very lightly, and into college, still very lightly, had I not had that experience. So for me, I think it's extremely important to have some taste of Judaism beyond just, registering for the menorah and Shabbat candles, because, those seem like the right things to do when you get married, or sending your kids off to get a bar bat mitzvah because, well, that was traditional and that's what we do. I think we really need to understand why we do the things we do. And the more I did that, the more I realized that there was a lot of significance behind this stuff. And the more you live the Jewishness, the more you feel it. It's like anything. The more you do it, the more you Jew, the more you feel it, and the more you understand why we even have kept this so long. So all of that to say that I think you can absolutely maintain a Jewish identity without observance. I think it's difficult, especially in today's world. And I think you don't have to go and be observant to the Orthodox degree if that doesn't feel like it's calling you, but start somewhere, taste it, feel it, get into a community, go to a dinner, be with people during holidays and see what goes on and take it from there.
You're teaching me to consider this in a different light that I hadn't thought of before, which is that, there's a perception that by being observant, somehow you're sacrificing time, right? Mm-hmm. Your control of your time. But in reality, you're regaining that control because you have that individual choice to set time aside for you and your family, your, private space to meditate on the meaning of life and what else, right? Whereas when you're just sort of free rambling, in the social, media or in your normal life, how much control of your time do you really have?
That is truth with a capital T. That is absolutely the truth of it. And yes, it's countercultural. So we think we lose time, that we lose control. But without that, you actually have no control over your life because everything else controls you. So absolutely, that is the truth of it.
Let's talk about Tikkun Olam. And the importance of it as, Jewish law and tradition in the context of, global warming and climate change. Why do you think there isn't a more organized and greater focus on the part of Jewish activism and Jewish community to address it as a united front? I think there's a predisposition to support, causes and environmental consciousness and,
absolutely,
and get engaged, but the Jewish community as such. I actually, when I worked for Federation, I had a multi, what do they call it? A multi-faith or interfaith coalition on the environment. And I brought, because we were facing the Yucca Mountain issue where they wanted to store all of the nation's spent nuclear fuel 100 miles outside of Las Vegas. And we were being forced to accept that, and eventually we, fortunately, common sense and a lot of effort overcame that for the time being. But I brought together Baha'i and Catholic and Christian and, Jewish and Muslim, all to speak to their communities. And actually in the news recently, I just saw the Pope had brought religious leaders from around the world together to try to, sign a proclamation to be presented at the global climate conference that's coming up. But where is that?
It's a really interesting question because, first of all, I know very little about what's going on in the Jewish community when it comes to climate change. But from what I hear, and I have friends that were and some that still are very active on that front, is it's twofold. Like, yes, we could certainly do more. And it is a Jewish value. The earth was given to us. And so we have to tend to it. I mean, there are mitzvot that directly relate to the land. So we're very conscious of the land. But as a Torah observant Jew, there is also this notion that the Torah is on a spiritual level, helping us correct what's going wrong on a physical level. So that's not to say don't address what's happening physically. Absolutely, we need to address what's happening physically to our earth. But it's a direct reflection of what's happening to us spiritually. We're becoming immoral as humanity. And so Torah's antidote is, the Creator gave us this manual of how to do good internally, externally, but it starts internally. Be a better person. Treat your neighbor as you'd like to be treated. All of these things, we've just completely lost it. And so, of course, the earth is reacting in that way. And that's not for everyone to sort of connect to and be like, yes, that makes sense. I know that sounds a little fluffy, potentially, but I think there is something there in that. Absolutely, we need to do good, but also we need to be good. And we need to find that connection internally to like what's going on externally, because they are absolutely linked.
It makes perfect sense to me, because if we can't take care of ourselves and each other, how can we possibly take care of our home?
That's the sad truth. That's absolutely the sad truth. And so I think like maybe if we follow that train of thought, the fact that also as a Jewish community, we've sort of been like, and I've seen this out in the Jewish world. It's like the observant Jews are on one side, everybody else is sort of like doing all the other things. And there's not a lot of communication. That changes, and it's not across the board, but I see that. And so I think if we could all remember that we're family and that we have the Torah, that's what binds us, in addition to other things, absolutely, that maybe we can all connect back to that truth, back to how to treat one another, back to unity. And that unity is going to heal the earth. I mean, I hope, because that's what we're told, right? So that's what I connect to. Of course, I also try to minimize my carbon footprint, and I try to understand what's happening with the climate. But I think it's deeper. I think it's deeper than that.
Unity is exactly the point, because we're all impacted.
That's it. Butterfly effect.
Regardless. So let's talk a little bit about Israel, because also from my experience, Israel has become sort of a focal point and a catalyst for Jewish continuity, for purpose of the survival of Israel is dependent on American Jews highly prioritizing Israel's survival and lobbying politically, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've noticed in my cultural enterprises, and in Jewish philanthropy in my community, and I'm sure it's probably true in others, that the majority of money that's raised goes out of the state of Nevada, for example, the vast majority, and a small piece stays here to develop, local education, local Jewish cultural, and so forth. And, that balance, I have an issue with. In fact, I was trying to talk to some people about proposing that these huge, galas of these legacy organizations from AIPAC to, Friends of the Israeli Military, FDIF, to ADL, to IAC, these major, well-organized machines that are propaganda, fundraising experts, right? You can't compete, as a grassroots local, Jewish enterprise. So maybe in the communities they come to, a small percentage of whatever they raise should be set aside for local Jewish education or local Jewish culture. Yeah. And that's sort of like a revolutionary thought that nobody wanted to have anything to do with. But what's your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously Israel needs our support. Obviously Israel is the survival of the Jewish people. But how can we strike a balance in that way?
Yes, like Israel is.
Because also, Becky, we're undermining the continuity in that way. Because they're not allowing on the grassroots level people to engage culturally, and give them the resources to do that.
I absolutely hear you. I absolutely hear you. Look, I think, again, holistic. We got to make it holistic. Israel absolutely is central to Jewish identity. Is it the only way to connect Jewishly? Just like I said, if we focused only on observant Jews, because you have to observe to connect to Judaism, we'd miss an entire 90% of Jews who need another connective step before they connect to Israel, or another step before they even want to dabble with observance. So yes, we need to start diversifying and becoming a little bit more holistic. And I mean, of course, we gotta take care of our own backyard before we think about the rest of the world. Now, Israel is very near and dear to my heart. I was born in Israel. I have family in Israel. I like to pride myself on being very educated about Israel history and Israel politics. There's some stuff there that I'm definitely still learning. It's very complex, but to know about Israel is to understand why, as a Jewish people, we fought so hard for so long to get back to Israel, to sustain our Judaism when we were in diaspora completely, before we had Israel back. Many mitzvot you can't even do outside of the land of Israel. There is such a spiritual, deep, just existential and very core, real connection to Israel that very much informs who we are as a family. And there are people who've never been to Israel, American Jews, that have such a deep connection to it, and they don't even know why. They're just like, I don't know, something about it. I have chills when I talk about it. I led a Birthright trip, and it was all entertainment industry professionals from LA. And each and every single one of them was so beyond moved. They were like, how did I not know this? Why did I think the media knew everything about Israel? Wow, this is so eye-opening. But they came back to their local area, and what happened then? And that's where I address your second point of, well, great. So we have to support the mothership, right? The core of who we are. What about the extension of that? The legs and the arms and the rest of us, and that's where absolutely we need to pump a lot of time and energy and just as much significance into those local areas, and that's why I think film is so powerful, because it gets to do that. And it gets to reach people. I wish I could, and a dream of mine was to tour this movie and meet every single Jew in the world. Like, what a pipe dream. But because how beautiful to meet all of our brothers and sisters, to connect back. Many haven't been to Israel. Many never will. But that doesn't mean they're not connected in some sense. And I think the local energy, whether that's money or time, or even just doing events like you're doing like this to connect local Jews in some way to their identity, is huge and very important. And I'm shocked that was news to people. Really, that's the first I'm hearing of that.
That's exactly why I've devoted my life to promoting Jewish film, because it really is one of the most effective mechanisms to educate and to assimilate, a continuity of community.
Absolutely.
Plus, it encourages people, young Jews like yourself, to explore and share their journey of discovery. We preserve our history. It's international. It's quite underappreciated, I think, in general, for the significance it has in the future of Jewish community and Jewish identity.
I agree. And I got your back. Any way that I can be a part of championing Jewish film and help, I'm here, because that's absolutely what I believe is a huge purpose of my life as well.
And you've been to Jewish film festivals, you know how magical they are, you know. And they're the safest way for people to re-engage, you know, who feel alienated or, you know, want to participate but don't know how, right?
Absolutely.
You know, totally not threatening, you know, they can be anonymous, or they can get engaged in the Q&A, or they can meet other people there. I've been focusing on increasing the number of non-Jewish attendants, you know, really making that important, because I think, you know, our history and values have to be shared, you know, especially in terms of the rise of anti-Semitism and, you know, all of the misperceptions about, you know, who Jews are. And last live festival I did in 2020 was the first time I actually had more non-Jews over the course of the festival participating than Jewish people. And I think that may have been a first in the history of Jewish film festivals.
It's bridging the gap. Absolutely. It's so huge to do that. I've had non-Jews connect to my film and say, not only connect and say, wow, we're so similar in our struggles, but also that's fascinating. I didn't know that that's why Jews did that. And so just to be able to educate, you're right, that absolutely, I think, correlates to decreased anti-Semitism, because we're educating others. Education, the beginning to connection. It's not just educating ourselves. It's absolutely important, not just our fellow Jews, but the world. So I completely agree with you.
What is your prediction for the evolution of Judaism and the Jewish people in the future? Where will we be in the next 100 years, a century from now?
Let me say that I'm honored that you even want to know what I have to say about this. I feel like, wow, when did I ever think somebody would ask me my prediction of Jewish continuity in the Jewish future? Because that just hit such an existential core with me. That is such a significant question. And I think something that is a humongous part of my life's work. Like I said, a daughter of an educator, her education is everything. If you don't experience something, if you don't understand, you will never continue to do. And I'm hopeful. I'm a hopeful person. My Hebrew name Tahel means to bring light. It's all about connecting to that light. So it's not just about connecting to it, like, you know, loosely. I really do believe that we are on the verge of a humongous social media boom with connection to Judaism. I think with film, I think with TV, and I think with more people like us championing really powerful Jewish content, that we can tip into positive representation of Jews, Jewish women, of all kinds of Jewish people, denominations in the mainstream media, on social media. I think we hopefully will continue to fight for truth. And I think there is absolutely a very slippery, it's a very addictive sort of thing on social media to propagate a lot of false things as potentially true. You know, this is my truth. No, that's your lie. And so I think fighting against that is also extremely important. And I see people doing that, and I'm excited to continue to do that myself. And so I'm hopeful that with that education, with balanced media representation, and with more, you know, film festivals and Jewish events that connect people, not just to one another, to the Jewish community, but to humanity. We talked about that unity consciousness. Then we heal everything. We heal the world. We heal our people, and we continue this thing, because why else continue it? If it's not going to connect us to ourselves, each other, and the world, if it's not going to do good, why would we want to continue it? So to me, it's always about looking back. If we fought so hard to make this thing happen, it's because there is intrinsic worth. We have to connect to that worth. We have to live it. And if we do, I only have hope and high hopes for the Jewish people continuing to do really good work in the world. We have to unite around that. And we have to, again, spread that message in a really holistic, grounded way. And that isn't always easy. It's very noisy out there. Like I said, Judaism is countercultural and does not always look very cool and sexy on the outside. But we have to do the work. And the more we do it, the more I know the younger generation very much prides itself on truth and standing for the right causes, and they'll catch on and they'll hang on. And I think it'll be a really beautiful, you know, many more generations, God willing, to come.
I think in times of extreme crisis, like we're living through now, that's when there is the greatest opportunity for, you know, overcoming those existential adversities, such as the pandemic and climate change and, the polarization and the rise of hate. And like some people think, Israel was created out of the ashes of the Holocaust, perhaps there's the potential for our planet as well to reach that next plateau of a better world.
From your lips to God's ears. I agree with that. I agree with that. And that's a fantastic lens to look through. It's a very Jewish lens to look through. And I'm glad you have that lens. I think we have to hold on tight to that lens.
So Baruch Hashem, God bless you, Becky, for your good work. And mazel tov on your baby and your new family. And I hope you will be able to come back in person to meet as many people as possible, because, they will grow from their exchange with you.
Thank you so much. This was such a privilege, such an honor. And I look forward to continuing to work together and have our energies help our people in the world for years to come. Hint, hint, I'm here.